Great to see all of you here this afternoon. Welcome to the first session of the Commission and ANA's fifth Racism in Nursing series. Whether you have been involved in previous series or are new to this space, we are so excited to be back, and we hope this interactive learning space is a place for you to find guidance and support. Today's session is one of an 8-part series. You will be able to earn 1.5 continuing nursing education units for attending today's session. Please stay to the end to complete your evaluation and receive the CNE certificate. This series is brought to you by the American Nurses Association and the National Commission to Address Racism in Nursing, a multi-organizational collaborative of leading nursing organizations examining the issue of racism within nursing and motivating all nurses to confront systemic racism. The Commission and ANA remain committed to driving systemic change within the profession. The association's recent response to the executive orders affecting diversity, equity, and inclusion underscores its dedication to advocating for inclusive policies and combating structural inequities in nursing. ANA continues to work with Congress and federal agencies to mitigate the impact of policies that threaten progress in health equity and workforce diversity. Please scan the QR code to learn more about the ANA's public statement, Protecting Healthcare for Americans. Before we get started, let's review our ground rules for each of our sessions.
Right.
Please remember that this is a brave space. Discussing racism and health equity is difficult and uncomfortable, especially for those directly impacted. Discussions such as these can serve as a trigger. So we ask that you maintain respect for everyone joining us today. Please stay on mute until it is your turn to speak. Listen intently and respond thoughtfully. Be present. Limit background distractions and multitasking if you can. And please take advantage of the virtual features available via Zoom. We encourage turning your cameras on and using the chat box when we get into our breakout sessions or the raise your hand features to communicate with the group. But please remember to mute your microphone when others are speaking. Please respect participant privacy. Do not disclose names or other sensitive information shared. If you do share a scenario involving a patient or a colleague, do not provide any PHI during today's call or any of our sessions. Feel free to send a direct message in the chat to ANA Practice if you have technical problems during today's call. Today's session, the Commission Journey Moving Past the Past, will be presented by Dr. Rumay Alexander, and I will now turn this presentation over to her.
Good afternoon. I am happy to see, as I'm looking at the bottom of this screen, the number grow and grow and grow. This means we're going to have wonderful perspectives from lots of people. And it is my joy and honor to guide you through that journey with a commission to address racism in nursing. There are some opening statements that I want to make because part of what I'm doing here is level setting for all of us, how the commission came to be, what we've been doing, and then getting into our own rooms where we can have further question and discussion to go on. So let me start by saying, whether we're talking about countries, communities, families, or individuals, the fact of the matter is we are living in the world that has created a lot of questions. Mainly, what in the world is going on? What we do know is that our world is hurting locally, nationally, and globally. Just a few things to mention that goes under these categories. The disasters like here in Carolina with Helene, or the LA fires. There's a South Carolina fire going on right now. the DEI backlash, massive deportation, job losses, data misuse and breaches, cost of eggs, let me just say, and mean, cruel, hateful language and communications. Speaking of what in the world is going on, there's such vast change. The fact of the matter is, even the headquarters for Kentucky Fried Chicken has moved from Kentucky to Texas. What have I heard? What in the world is going on? Lots of change, lots of movement. In today's landscape, where there have been these seismic disruptions to decency and to the status quo, and external pressures that are unrelenting and constant, trust between colleagues is at an all-time low. But when we start thinking about the past, you're really beginning to talk about the experiences that each of us has had, both so it's individual as well as collective. And the fact of the matter is, experiences teach us. And when experience shows up, it usually shows up as a feeling, a thought, an action, a sense of being, particularly around legitimacy. And so we've got to think about how we interpret what happened in the past, what's been teaching us, and what are some of the messages. Just a few that I want to throw out on the table based on past experiences that I have heard as me and other colleagues have crossed the country are these. Policy reflects the value of its time. When the implicit is not made explicit, injustices flourish. Implicit bias is actually a form of buried prejudice that just kind of comes out in an automatic and often unthinking kind of way. We know that stereotypes are a form of identity theft. They steal who a person really is and are often a label that's placed on individuals before we ever get to know them. Accountability is a organizational climate issue. What is permitted and not permitted creates the climate. We also know that politics is about resource allocation. And what resources? Time, money, and people. We know that health disparities are the downstream results of upstream decisions. But you know what? Knowledge is nothing without action. And let me just remind you that nice is not a skill and hope is not an action. Some actions are going to need to be taken. And so as you think about the past and what the experiences bring, we have to move forward, not dismissing them, but letting those inform us as we move into the present and into the future. The power of the moment, colleagues, is not retroactive. The energy of realness changes things. In fact, realness is transformative. The future is in relationships. So, according to James Baldwin, good individual to be reminding us of things, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. I'll also place this before you to just think about. There are so many people who are tired, sick and tired of all sorts of things. But I remind you that tired will always reign when it goes unchallenged. Let me say that again. Tired will always reign when it goes unchallenged. And the fact of the matter is, one of the easiest ways to challenge it is to ask questions, because questions move us from past to what's happening and how, and to whom it's happening. it also moves us into the future in terms of what it is we want to be happening and how it can be. So all this undergirds the commission's journey moving past the past. We're going to do a series of slides to help you just level set a bit more about the journey of the commission. Next slide. So as you can see here in background, you can see who were the members originally of the commission, and that in January 2021, these associations came together. There was great discussion about groups who were in the past a part of ANA, who also left membership for the most part in ANA, but a recognition that we are more powerful together and that there needed to be some work to bring us together, some honest dialogue, some honest conversation. Next slide. And even though ANA, and particularly Dr. Ernest Grant and his discussions with colleagues from the other groups was instrumental in this, the bottom line was there has to be an admission to what occurred, an acknowledgement of its pain, in its oppression, and then a way to move forward. So what you see here are the inaugural commission participating organizations. There were close to about 30 of them, quite frankly. And so maybe even more than that, might have been 39, but you can see that we were involving people from all the areas. And while ANA's was major at work, the commission actually belonged to the four groups and represented those four groups. So I thought it was good for you to be able to see who participated in the work. Next slide. With that said, there was a vision and a mission, as you can see here. And it was really, really important for us to embrace that we lead and should lead by example, that advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging was necessary to uniting and eliminating acts towards racism. It's a multifaceted issue and a societal ill. And so it was chosen as the mission to provide that framework to confront structural and systemic racism and its impact on historically marginalized and minoritized nurses, and to advocate for change. Change is the big word in this work from beginning up until now. Next slide. And so here are our goals, which we really did meet. And those national discussions, like the one we're having today, were vital to moving and understanding perspectives, differences of opinion, and different experiences. We worked on strategies to actively address what's happening in four major areas: nursing education, nursing practice, policy, and research. And that included addressing issues of leadership and the use of power. We use the nursing scope and standards of practice, or scopes of standards and practice, as a framework and a guide as a roadmap for some of the actions that would need to be put forth once the commission got to the point of developing them. Next slide. So one of the major first pieces of the work was this definition of racism. It was a way to bring us all centered on what we mean by racism. So this work that you have in front of you was the result of our coming together with perspectives. And you will note that This one is a little bit different from the other racism definitions you've seen, mainly because as we searched the literature, there were no definitions of racism necessarily made by a nurse. And we wanted to really reflect who we are as nurses in this piece. Here you have what I think is somewhat different from most definitions, because we get into the essence of what nursing is all about and the work day after day, and the experiences that we find ourselves saturated in. So I'm going to point to a couple of things. One is that assault on the human spirit. Pay attention to the ideology of superiority, because that's a big driver, but the persistence of it, as we talk about the moral suffering and the physical harm, as well as the ways in which it perpetuates systemic injustices and inequities. You'll get to talk about this more in your breakout sessions. Next. And so here are some milestones for you to take a look at. Like I said, we've been working on this since 2021. We've had listening sessions. We did national surveys. We've had virtual summits. You see when the definition was developed, and how we also talked about navigating in nursing webinars. Next slide. In the listening sessions, here are some of the comments that we heard. I want you to know that those sessions were always full of emotion, and we probably used quite a few boxes of Kleenexes wherever we were, because just recalling some of the experiences, those past experiences, came to the surface, and this was necessary as part of us moving forward, part of us acknowledging what has happened, who it has happened to, and how, or the result of what has happened and experienced, its effect on us. In fact, you probably will notice that out of these listening sessions, actually there is some reflection in the definition of racism. I want to call your particular attention to the spirit murder piece, only because I personally believe that murdering the spirit is one of the worst things you can do to an individual. But it is about this constant beatdown that really has people in places that don't allow them to flourish, to dream, that sucks the life out of them. And it's part of what makes folks tired. In some cases, it even ends up being fuel for what they call deaths of despair, where people end up taking their lives just out of the whole frustration of how racism affects every aspect of our lives. Next slide. The listening sessions continue. I'll just give you a second while I'm talking for you to take a look at it. And you can actually see how people are thinking, because they were free to share with us as a result of the experience. Here's what's going through my head. Here's what's going through my heart. Here's what's going through my life. Next slide. So in this survey, we had over 5,600 respondents. So this is not just a handful of people who shared their stories and their experiences with us. You have a breakdown, probably to your left, of who was doing the sharing and who was part of this. But the bottom line is at the bottom. Over 3/4 of Black nurses say racism negatively impacts their professional well-being. This is not a surprise to some. It is information to others, but it's key. Next slide. And the impact on racism is huge in terms of how it impacts health and well-being. You notice that people are sharing how it sits with them, how it physically assaults, how it morally assaults, how it traumatizes. And this is within the nursing profession itself, where we talk about being the most trusted in the healthcare arena. But we're also humans, and we bring our biases and our prejudices and our stereotypes with them. The whole point being is not, did it occur? The point is, how did it show up? And do you recognize it when prejudice, bias, and acts of racism occur? Next slide. So, during 2022, we developed what you see are the top 10 ways to be an anti-racist. We worked on what this series was originally launched and called, which was Project Echo. And you can see that we did some work on allyship with also infographics. If you go to the ANA website, all of these pieces can be downloaded and you can check into them. Next slide. So we're capturing history. You see when we continue to do the work from the time we started up until now. And you're getting some sense of last year, what the sessions were about and who the speakers were. All of our sessions have allowed for continuing education credit. And I want you to know that there's been just tremendous dialogue, conversation, and community created by these sessions. But you get some idea of the topics that we've talked about and covered, and we'll be covering in this year's series as well. Next slide. So here we are at a space where you can see confidence in addressing racism in nursing after attending our sessions, because we believe in evaluation. And you can also get a breakdown of who attended our sessions. It's important to know who we're talking to and what impact it has had. Just being able to share stories is so powerful. And it does inform, and it does help to shape. And it gives a sense of collective experience. You know, we sometimes wonder if we're the only one experiencing this, but you know, this evidence shows you that that's not the case. Next slide. Here's some of the impact, and we particularly highlighted some of the messages. Not only was there gratitude, but there was people walked into it timidly, but the more they were in it, the bolder they got and the more brave they got. And that is just absolutely fantastic. Just having a place for safe discussion was really key to be provided. In most of our spaces, we kind of screened what we wanted to talk about. What did we want to face? What did we have to say? But what gets oppressed also gets depressed. And so it was key for us to be able to have sessions where true feeling, honest questions, things that I've always wanted to ask, but not sure I could ask, could happen. Next slide. So major impact, even in the discussions. So in our foundational report, which we worked on 2022 to address racism, you will notice there's an outline here of when we created the areas and topics. There was public comment, and then there was publication. History was important. Contemporary context was important. And understanding how racism shows up in 4 targets areas, education, policy, practice, and research, were key. Next slide. So this is what the report looks like. Here are from the authors in the areas that I just highlighted. Next slide. Here's work that we've done on actionable allyship in nursing. And there's actually a document where you can kind of self-evaluate where you are in this space, because allyship is an ethical duty. It is intentional. It's an intentional intervention. And it's advocacy and support to eliminate harmful acts, works, and deeds, and creating space to amplify voices that traditionally are not heard, recognized, or welcomed. We fall in these zones. We may have a little bit of us in each one of those zones, but being able to self-assess where we are helps us to know where we need to grow and the work we need to do on ourselves, because the most powerful work starts with us working on ourselves. That self-awareness. Next line. So here you have a basic outline, a timeline, just so you can see that work has been going on since 2021 and continues to grow and grow and keep working. Resources being added, discussions continuing, and reflect what's actually happening. So we're not just stuck in the past regarding who treated who in which way and how that felt, and because of that, we can't move forward. Remember, the past is to inform. Out of the past comes wisdom. But if we're going to make things better for us all, we have to be together, and we must work together. Next slide. So in 2023-24, there was discussion about change, including how we are structured, and a new commission structure with revised mission and vision statements has occurred. As you can also see, we've done the Mary Eliza Mahoney lectures. We continued the Project Echo, and we did a lot of work in the health equity space in the fall. We have also created, out of this work, commission funding opportunities so that innovation can occur in this space. You know, executive or EO, which we hear now and we think of as executive orders, can also mean exceptional opportunities. And with that comes, how do we take where we are presently, understand it, not be stopped by it, but doing what we have always done, and that is continuing education, continuing research, continuing ideas about how we help human flourishing to occur. So, with that said, all this undergirds the commission's journey. You kind of know where we are, you know where the documents, you know that there have been conversations, you know there have been times for stories, which always are illuminating. We know there's been continued work, and we know that we're moving in the space of talking about this work, even when it's trying to be suppressed. We must relentlessly continue, and we must continually think about how we address what we really need to address, which is health equity. With that said, we are now ready to go into our breakout groups, because this is where you can have further discussion. Hopefully, most of you have read the commission report, or at least pulled the section that you were interested in. And you have these fantastic leaders facilitating your group sessions who I know have read it, understand it, and have actually participated in the report and the work ahead. With that said, I will now turn it back to our team so that we can go into our breakout sessions and have robust discussion when we return.